And we're talking today with Susan Alexjander. I guess first let me ask, what was it that first inspired you to decode more or less the actual frequencies of the 4 base molecules of our DNA?
Well, first, thanks for letting me have this opportunity, Damien, because I love your work. I first got interested when I was a graduate student. I was in my 30s. Actually, I was probably 40. I was a late student. And I was noticing that some of the pieces that my colleagues were creating were actually impacting the body in negative ways. I mean, they were experimenting with banging on things and making loud noises and just being, I thought, very irresponsible with sound. So that led me to wonder, well, what is going on? How is this impacting the body? And that led me to the whole study of vibration and a notion that if there's vibration going on in our bodies, what is that?
Right.
And if we could hear it, what would it sound like? How could we actually perceive it?
Yeah.
So I met a biologist, David Deemer, who is actually very eminent in his field. And I asked him, I said, David, how could we hear the body? And he said, well, there are some frequencies in DNA that we can measure on the infrared spectrum, and that's, of course, electromagnetic spectrum. And infrared is not visible light, it's actually heat, what we call heat. But there are these molecules in the chemistry of DNA that jiggle and vibrate and bend right at the bonding. It's the bonding that does this movement. And so you can find these measurements in any science lab. Anybody can do this.
Right.
It's not witchcraft. You just go and find them, and then you can bring those very, very high frequencies down and map them over to sound frequency. Light and electromagnetic frequencies and sound are both measured in hertz. So it's a perfect opportunity to do any kind of mapping project. So what we found is that what's going on in the chemistry of DNA, we're not talking about a genome, we're talking about the base chemistry, adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. What's going on in there has about a 2.5 octave spread. Each base is we measured all 4 bases, and they're actually very, very similar.
Yeah, I noticed
But there's some interesting things in there, and I would encourage people who, if they're interested, they can go to my website, which is oursounduniverse.com, and read an article about it that was published in the IEEE journal some years ago, and it gives all the details and it tells you exactly, shows charts and things like that.
Right. I actually copied that into a Word document and include it in the class materials in that section
for
people to read. And also direct them to your website for the other work and stuff you've been doing. And the music you did with the DNA frequencies, it's definitely, I know you said you've had extremely positive reactions with it, and I did the same and converted the like you said, the couple of octaves and a half or so of the frequencies you guys converted down in octaves and expanded those even and created some music with them, and have been getting the same type of response from people that they're very interesting.
Well, the interesting thing about those frequencies are they're almost completely microtonal. That is, they fall between the cracks of a half step. And if you talk to any musicologist, theorists, they'll tell you that those have been labeled dissonant, and they're supposed to be not accessible to our bodies, or we don't particularly like them. And I found just the opposite, Damien. And it may have been the synthesizer sound patch that I was using was so gorgeous, but what happens is those frequencies are so tight that certain combinations of them are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
and what they do is they rub against each other and they create beats. And I have a feeling there's something about those beats that is important.
Right, it's those pulsed intervals that make a difference. And, I always say there's that old jazz quote that Lisa Simpson jokes about in an episode of The Simpsons that, you have to listen to the notes between the notes, and it's not a joke. They're referring to the intervals. And
yeah, exactly. And I think it does two things for the nervous system. It wakes it up because something different is going on. The brain likes that. The brain goes, oh, that's exciting. But at the same time, it kind of calms it down. And I don't know how that works, but it just does.
Yeah. It's the same, the Hindu ragas, the sitar plays microtonal intervals, the chanting of the Quran that Dr. Jarrah and I studied, they're using microtonal scales, and, to some people it is dissonant and harsh. The first time I listened to, Wendy Carlos playing, classical and just temperament, it sounded very dissonant to me. Now I find the opposite. The more I get used to it, the more natural it sounds, and the more regular pop music sounds dissonant and out of tune to me. And
oh, sure. Well, the Vedics have been doing it for thousands of years,
Right. Yeah.
So there you go.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that was that project. It was a long time ago, but
I know. It was long before most people in the New Age community were talking about DNA or DNA activation or, a lot of the other claims being made. You guys actually did that. I point out that was years before the internet or anybody else was even using those terms or even purporting to actually do anything with them, let alone actually doing anything with them. So.
Well, it's been a dream of mine to take a lot of rhythms of the body and program them. I've never done it, but there's so many rhythms going on. There's, of course, the breath cycle and the heartbeat, and then there are circadian rhythms, and there are hormonal rhythms, and there are, brain waves. And I just think that would be such an exciting project. I really hope somebody does it someday. Just program them all and see what the effect is on the body.
Right. Yeah, Jarrah was even mentioning, even our dermatology, our tissue, every tissue has its own resonant frequency. Everything is, but it's all connected.
It's just amazing.
Right.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that sort of launched me into that whole world of vibrational correspondences, and there's some very interesting things in that study that we're talking about because. People could read about it in the article for themselves, but there were perfect intervals in there.
Mm-hmm.
There was at least one or maybe two perfect fifths. I mean, mathematically perfect. Right. Octaves, perfect fourths, and so on. And I once asked a mathematician what the odds would have been out of 60 pitches to have, say, 7 or 8 perfect intervals, and he said, pretty astronomical.
Right, yeah.
So there's some intelligent thing going on in that collection.
Yeah.
And it's just, of course, the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I found it interesting that you guys first picked tablas to use to begin composing with those frequencies, and then later came across the realization, well, first it was obvious that the C sharp was sort of what bound them all together, and then it's kind of a center frequency, and then with the C sharp Vedic ohm theory, you guys found that the average was 544.4, and that's the exact mean frequency of my ohm C sharp singing bowl. And you guys intuitively
that was
said
purely intuitive. Because I did the music first, and then I went back and I analyzed it.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't study those philosophical issues first.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it was amazing that I picked the tabla because I like the sound of it.
Yeah, me too.
And I picked C sharp because that's what the tuning seemed to call for.
It did,
That's
yeah.
kind of what they wanted to revolve around.
Right, and I was glad that you had pointed that out because it kind of told me what, out of all those many, many tones when I was going to compose with them and make music with them, it told me what my, root note should be as opposed to having to figure it out for myself, so which could be pretty time-consuming and complicated hadn't, you pointed that out first, so.
Well, I think, I really think the body knows it's an extraordinary intelligence, and we just get out of the way and say, well, what feels right?
Right.
And there it'll be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and then in those individual scales of the four base molecules, if you can call them that, I do. You also point out that the F sharp is very present. To me, it looks like they almost kind of bookend the the scales. A lot of the lower ones and the higher ones would be F sharp, and you've done some further work on that. Maybe you could talk about.
Yeah, it does. It's very interesting, and I'm not sure about this, but I'll throw it out for your listeners because maybe someone will want to investigate it. But I think that the highest color vibration that we can see is not indigo, but
violet.
ultraviolet or violet or
violet.
something. Anyway, I think that maps over to a F sharp.
It does, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can't swear to it.
No,
I
it
haven't
does.
done that
Yeah.
research, but the F sharp really stood out for me, and so then I started seeing F sharps in very unusual places.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really caught my eye was an article by Tom Danley, and this was back in I believe the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Danley was an acoustic engineer, and he was hired by the Egyptian government to go in, to crawl around into the Great Pyramid and try and map the resonant frequencies of that pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you blast the pyramid with sound,
Right.
what is the one tone that will last the longest, have the longest decay?
Yeah.
And that's its resonant frequency. That's the frequency it likes to resonate to.
Right.
And so when he came back, he's not a musician, but he had a musician working with him. And he said, it sounds like it's some kind of an F sharp chord. Well, that people went crazy, and he had signed a non-disclaimer form, so the Egyptian government immediately shut him down and said, you're not allowed to say anything more. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't.
Right.
But I've been working a bit with Christopher Dunn's wonderful book, The Giza Power Plant, which, if you haven't read it, you would love it.
I've read parts.
And I recently have been back in contact with Chris, and we've been working around this idea. What is the importance of F sharp? And it turns out that there is some evidence that there is a chord there. The sarcophagus is tuned to A. Nobody knows quite why.
Right.
And then there's your C sharp grounding tone of the earth. Mm-hmm. So these correspondences just went on and on. For instance, I read in Freddie Silva's book that someone had heard this. Actually, a few people have heard this high chirping or very high pitch around crop circles, and they've identified it as an F sharp.
That's interesting.
So I just don't know. It's very mysterious. Is that article also on your site? The F sharp article?
It's
that might be an interesting one to put up.
Oh, yeah.
If not, they can go to my site and read it. And again, that's an old article, probably needs some updating, but it has more examples of the kinds of things that I just said.
Yeah, and I do, like I said, I've read through that on the F sharp, and I should probably just add that into the documents folder, but I do direct people to your site quite often, and tell them to go in there and look and read some of the other articles, listen to some of the music, and I know people have been.
If they're interested.
So, yeah.
I guess the last example, and of course this research took years until I finally put the article together. But I was reading something in Leonardo Journal, which is, of course, very, very technical and, very respected magazine. And I can't remember the author's name. It's in the article, but he had researched the Schumann resonances. And as they originally fall out, of course, they start at 7.8, which is around a B, between B and C on our scale. And they don't contain F sharps, A's, and C sharps. But there's something about if you double those as octaves and you bring them up into hearing range, they will become F sharps, A sharps, A's, and C's, and C sharps, because there's something about the curve of the Earth, a sphere, that when you bring those up, it, I believe it shrinks them.
I see.
I can't explain it, but it's all in the article.
Yeah, I'll have to look
so
into that.
So that was just another mysterious piece.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll have to do that math myself too and kind of check that out, because I've translated the 7 harmonics of the Schumann Earth resonance into frequencies, so that I get a lot of Reiki practitioners in my classes, and they ask, what kind of music is appropriate to go along with a Reiki session, and there's a new trend of singing or vocalizing while doing a Reiki session, and I say, well, you have to be very careful with that, because what's coming out of your hands is already a song. It's already these frequencies that are common with the Schumann Earth resonance, and these are what those notes are. So, just be very careful about what you sing while doing Reiki or play in the background, as opposed to, silence would probably be best. To me, it's like trying to listen to 2 radio stations at once when people are playing music that doesn't.
Also, I would ask the client, because everybody's different.
Well, right, yeah. And so, some music that's playing during a session, or if someone's trying to do the chanting or vocalization, it's like, it's dissonant to what's being, I'm sensitive to those frequencies. I know what they are as notes. I can feel them, and to me, it's like I said, like trying to listen to 2 different radio stations at the same time or something. So, it's probably best.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, what are some of your current projects? I know you just got back from Europe, and I know you have some other, you always have something going on, and what are some of your current?
Well, I do want to follow up on the pulsar thing that you and I started, to see if there's some interesting correspondences there, and that's a lot of data work, but hopefully someday we'll dive into that. I guess the latest project that I completed was about the brain, and I'm really interested in consciousness and the brain, and how things get sorted and downloaded to our conscious mind, and all the things that get left out, and who's doing the sorting, and all of that. So that piece was called Neurocantos, and I have samples of all my work on my website, but I don't yet have that one. I have to put that one up there soon. So, I've been kind of investigating black holes, and
interesting.
The interesting thing about the black hole was that I did a lot of research, probably for a year, to try and understand the science of it. And, the conclusion really is it's theoretical physics. We don't know. It's really all a story. And I think I'm very encouraged, because now I see science humbling itself a little bit more and saying, really this is the best story we can come up with.
Right.
Because it's changing weekly.
Yeah.
Week by week, it's changing, and of course, the big thing now is to understand gravity. And I think, Damien, there's something very, very pivotal and basic to all of our understandings about frequency through gravity. I don't know what it is, but that's the next frontier. And gravity, of course, affects everything. I mean, it's pushing you and I, it's slowly pulsing you and I all the time. Everything is being moved by this force.
Right. I think that's going to be very exciting. Definitely. Yeah, it calls to mind, I forget the Lucia La Luna, I think, this woman singer in the 40s or 50s, and she made a coloring book and an album about recording music on the moon because of the different atmosphere, so everything sounded different. I just thought that was an interesting approach to looking at the physics of sound and vibration, and how things would be completely different were we not in this atmosphere and environment. So,
well, we can talk about this all that we want to, and I mean the collective we. Right. Not just you and I, but I think what's desperately needed in this culture is for people to sing, for people to have a place to chant, to actually come into a sacred space and to chant. And if I had any hope or vision for the future, this is what I would love to see. And I'm going to kind of end it with this, but I would love to see spaces, in our culture where, between the hours of 6 a.m. Well, maybe 24 hours. I mean, that would be ideal. Somebody could come in and there would be chanting going on. There would be somebody facilitating it. And there would be 2 rows. The first circle would be the people sitting chanting. The second outer circle would be people who had just come in and they're required to sit there for 15 minutes without making any sound so that they can attune to the space. And then they are allowed to join the first circle to actually chant.
Yeah, that would be...
And you come and you go whenever you want to. It's donation only. It would be like a sacred chapel where instead of praying, you sing, you chant.
Right. Yeah, that would be amazing. That would sound great. Well, as I quoted in the beginning of the second book, St. Augustine, more or less, it's been summarized, but said to sing is to pray twice. So the chanting is definitely important. It's being eliminated by the Catholic Church, but yet it's probably one of the most important aspects to attending a cathedral for the, to be attuned with those resonances once a week would something beneficial to everyone.
I mean, even if you think you can't sing,
right? Yeah.
You just feel where that drone tone is, and you just hum there. You'll be carried. You'll be carried in it. You don't have to do a thing.
Well, at least if you can't hit that exact note, an octave of it, or a fifth, or harmony, and not be out of tune with it, as most, I don't know if you've ever been to a group event where everyone chants Om at the same time and everybody's all off key and, hitting whatever note I had a friend get a headache from it and have to leave. It was that bad. It was that dissonant. And so, that's one thing I demonstrate sometimes in classes. I tell everybody to chant Om and everybody's off key, and then I hit the singing bowl and I say, now do it. And the difference, they can feel the difference for themselves. They know it's
sure, or there could be a Sruti box or something.
Sure, yeah, anything that's starting to put the tuning forward.
Right. Anything. Well, that's what the facilitator would be doing.
Well, in the Tibetan monks, like I said, they pull it out of thin air. They say it comes from nature. They don't use a starting note, but of course they chant every day. It's like perfect pitch to them, so they're used to it. Trying to get people to understand that it's important, and it's not supposed to be something random, whatever comes out of your mouth. It's not about what you're attuned to right now.
Are there any wrap-up thoughts you want to do before we end?
I think that's about it. I'm looking forward to the Pulsars project too. I've been just as busy with the move and everything else, and working on this video we're doing right now for the class. So I certainly appreciate you taking the time out of our busy schedules here to talk for a bit. And,
my pleasure, Damien. I wish you all the luck with your work. It's such good work, and
thank you. You too.
Keep me informed.
I definitely will. Thanks. You too. For more information on Susan's work and music and the frequencies of our DNA, visit her website at oursounduniverse.com or visit mine at damienkeller.wix.com/soundsgreat and go to music clips. Thanks for listening. In Love, Light, Sound, and Vibration, I'm Damian Keller.